Hello everyone and welcome back to the fourth tutorial in the Python tutorial series for absolute beginners by myself, One Stop Programming. In this video we're going to cover functions and how they're useful, some different restrictions there are with functions, and why you should use them in every single program you write for the rest of your life. So let's say I've got this hello world chunk of code here, and I want to run this chunk of code a couple times in my program. So I take it, I copy it, I've got some other code right here, and I paste it there, and I got some other code right here, and I paste it there. Cool, my code works fine, everything works, does exactly what I want it to. But then I need to change this if statement to my var does not equal 0. And then I have to go through and find every other place in my code and change that where I pasted that chunk of code. That is a big pain, and when you have hundreds or even thousands of lines of code, that is completely impractical and would take hours to find all of those locations. So that's why we have functions. So you can get rid of all that and then just define this as a function that you can call by a name, and then it will just execute this block of code. So to do that, I'm going to type def, D-E-F, space, the name of the function. This is an arbitrary name. It can be whatever you want. So I'm going to type hello world, and then opening parenthesis, closing parenthesis, colon, new line, tab. So that's how you define a function. So I've defined the function hello world, and we'll get in later on in this video what these parentheses mean, but for now we can just leave that blank. So then I can take all this and paste it right there, and make sure that everything gets tab indented to the same location, otherwise you'll get a syntax error. So now I can save and run this. Why did nothing happen? I clearly have this defined as hello world. Why did nothing happen? Well, because I never actually called this function. If I can define as many functions as I want, but they're not actually going to be executed until I call the function. So I do that by typing hello world, opening and closing parenthesis, save that, and now I can run this, and we get, what is your name? Kevin. Enter a number. I enter 1. Kevin is great. So when I say hello world, that executes this function just as the print function, which is also another function, executed. So back when everything was aligned back on this the leftmost, the first thing we did was we printed hello world. And print is just a function. The syntax is pretty much exactly the same. It is exactly the same. You type the function name, and then opening parenthesis, and then you type hello world. Now hello world is a parameter that the print function takes. If we want to add a parameter to our hello world function, we can just type a variable there. So let's call it my string. So now the hello world function takes a variable called my string. So let's say that I wanted to print not hello world every time, but I wanted to print whatever my string was. So I can delete this hello world, and now what I'm saying is the print function gets prints the variable my string. What is the value of my string? My string is whatever we pass into the function hello world. So down here, if we just I'll show you what this looks like if we just run it now. If we just run it now, we get a error, hello world missing one required positional argument, my string. So that's saying is you can't call hello world because you're missing the argument my string. I need that in order to run this function. So we can type hello function world. And now when we run that, we see it says hello function world, and then it runs that code. So let's say we copy this line and do it again, and we say hello 123 world, and then run that. My name is Kevin. 1. Hello 123 world. My name is Bob. So there we go. We saw this run again, and with just a different parameter, and it did a different thing. So that is extremely useful in the context of any application you might ever write. So let's start now by getting rid of all of this hello world junk and writing a application that is actually useful, and that is, let's write a calculator. I love doing this. I think it's a great way to kind of get your feet wet in a programming language. It's the first actual application that I always write whenever I learn a new language. So I'm just going to try to get you guys started, and then I'm going to encourage you guys to finish this application by yourself. So there's one other thing I need to show you first. So let's say I define the function add, and then I say num1 and num2. So if you want to have a function that takes more than one argument, you just separate it by a comma. Like, I'm not sure if I said this before, but these are called arguments. So the add, you can read this as, I'm defining the add function that takes two arguments, num1 and num2. If I added a third num, it would say, I'm defining the add function that takes three arguments, num1, num2, and num3. These are also arbitrary names. They can be whatever you want. They're nothing special. I could name this banana or anything. But for simplicity's sake, I'll call it num1 and num2. Let's say I want this function to add num1 and num2 together. So an easy way I can do that is I can just say return, the keyword return, num1 plus num2. Now this is the return keyword. We haven't seen this before, but let's just kind of think through what it might do. We saw, I remember, with the input function, when we said my name equals input, and then we had our prompt string, just like that. Remember, we said that this evaluated to whatever I typed in. So this returns the value of whatever I type in. So then that would simplify to Kevin if I typed in Kevin. Similarly, when I type return, when I'm defining a function, if I type add num1 and num2, and I give argument values for num1 and num2, it will return the sum of num1 and num2 based on this line right here. So if I typed my value equals add 1 plus 4, and then print my value, and then I ran that code, we see 5. 4 plus 1 is 5. Another thing you could do, if you wanted to just not assign it to a variable, is you could just stick in add right into the print function and just run that straight away. Notice that we got to keep track of our parentheses now, because we have print, which calls another function, which needs to have the opening and closing parentheses for its function itself, and then the opening and closing parentheses for the print function. Now notice that when I call the add function, the way I call it looks exactly like the function up here. This right here is referred to as the function signature, because this is what the function, it's unique. It's called add, and it takes two arguments. So when I call the function, it has to look exactly like this. It's add, and first argument, and then second argument. When I'm calling the function, it doesn't matter what the numbers are called. I could change this to num55 and num22, as long as I also change it down here to num55 and num222. that will still work. It doesn't matter what the variables are called from the perspective of when I call the function, but I'll just change this back to num1 and num2 for simplicity. So let's say I wanted to make some kind of calculator application where I define functions for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and I will tell you right now that the operators are exactly what you'd think they'd be. They are oh, another thing that I'm surprised I didn't teach you guys yet is comments. Commenting your code is extremely important. So let's add a comment right above this. The comment is just a pound sign or the number symbol. And let's say returns the sum of num1 and num2. So commenting your code is an extremely important skill, and extremely important, especially if you're working on something that someone else might maintain later down the road. I recommend you start commenting your code very well right in the beginning and get into a good habit, because nothing is worse than looking at someone else's code and not being able to figure out what they did. So returns the sum of num1 and num2. That's what the add function does. I'll tell you right now that for multiplication you have that symbol, the kind of star symbol, subtraction, division. So the goal of this little project is going to be to make a calculator that does addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So let's just define kind of the main purpose or main function of the program. So let's just define the main function of the program as def main, and it will take no arguments. So main is commonly the entry point for an application in C or C++, and we like to carry that over in Python where we have a main function, and that's what we'll call at the start of the program. So to follow along that construct, we'll just type main right there. So we'll define all of our functions up here. Main will be the last function that we define, and then when the script is actually run, we will run the main function. So that's kind of how programming a large program works, is you have the entry point to the application, which is going to be main. Let's figure out what we want this to do. Let's say operation equals input. What do you want to do? And we'll give them the options add, subtract, multiply, divide. So close quote, close that. So then we can do an if statement. If operation does not equal the string plus, or, so this is also a good point. We're just going to validate to make sure the operation variable equals a valid operation. Something that you can't do, unfortunately, is you can't say operation does not equal plus, comma, minus, comma. You can't do that. You have to do separate separate little parts here. So we just copy and paste this a couple times. Plus, minus, multiplication, divide. Now there is a little more elegant way to do that, but we haven't covered that yet, so we'll just do it like this. So then we do our colon, and then tab, new line tab. So as you can see, you can get kind of a pretty complicated if statement, so it's important to know how to use these and how to simplify them. You can also do parentheses in an if statement, so I could do this, and it would just do order of operations. So let's say I wanted to evaluate that part first. These are all or, so it doesn't really matter, but it would evaluate this first, and then or it with this. So you do have the freedom to do parentheses in if statements if you want a certain part evaluated first. that is definitely something very common and very useful. So if operation does not equal plus, or does not equal, or actually we want these to be ands because we want to see if it does not equal any of these. So if all of those are false, so operation does not equal plus. Okay, let's say we enter x or 9 or no, something that's not any of these. So let's just say we enter 9. So operation would equal 9. 9 does not equal plus. True. And 9 does not equal minus. True. And 9 does not equal star. True. And 9 does not equal divide. True. So here we can put a comment, invalid operation. And we can just say print, you must enter a valid operation. Else, colon, new line. So we're going to say if you did not enter a valid operation, which we determined from this if statement right here, which we just went through and simplified with the test case that was invalid, we say print you must enter a valid operation. And then otherwise you've entered a valid operation, so we want to do the calculation. Say num1 equals input enter num1, and then num2 equals input enter num2. And then we'll say if operation equals, remember the double equals, plus, then print add num1, comma num2. Now notice that I coincidentally made these num1 and num2, and it was the same as these. It definitely does not have to, and I will actually change these to var1 and var2 just to illustrate that point, that they do not have to be the same name as what you define up here. So we'll print the result of the addition of var1 and var2. So I'm going to leave off here and let you guys finish the rest of this application. Then I'll come back and we can finish off, or I will show you the completed code and we'll run it and see what the results are. So I will see you guys back in a minute after you hopefully finish coding this up. If you have any problems, just skip forward and watch the end of the video. Alright, so here I have the completed code, and as you saw in the speech bubble, I actually made a mistake when I was giving you the template code, and that was with this line right here, or these two lines actually, when we take var1 and var2. Input, when you use the input function, that will always return a string. So even if I type in input and then type 5, that will return the value type Python. I go to the shell here because this is probably the easiest way to demonstrate this. If I type 5, that will return the string 5 and not the number 5, which does not have the single quotes. So in order to get the number 5, I need to type input and then, or int input, and then whatever I type will be cast to an integer from a string. So if I try that again and I type in, it will say cannot cast or cannot change this literal LL to a number. That was my mistake. Sorry about that. So we have int input num1 and num2 as var1 and var2. So then we go through and we evaluate If operation is addition, then we print the addition of var1 and var2. Else, if operation is division, we print division of var1 and var2. Else, if operation is subtraction, we print subtraction of var1 and var2. And then we do else. Notice how I don't have to do an else if here, because we already know it's valid from up here. We know it's either multiplication, division, subtraction, or addition. We don't actually have to do else if for multiplication. We just say else because we know it has to be multiplication. And then up here, I did the commenting and definition of each of these other functions. Very straightforward up here. So let's go ahead and run this really quick. Again, to exit out of this, we type exit. And then Python hello world. What do you want to do? Let's multiply just to illustrate that that works. Num1, let's do 8 times 6, 48. There we go. And we notice that this just finishes executing after this. And you're like, why doesn't it loop back and run main again? Because we go from here, and then it should go right here, and then it should just run main again. What happens is the interpreter goes through linearly, starting at the first line. So when I run this application, it goes, okay, this. Okay, now run main. Then it goes, okay, where's main? Oh, main's right there. Let's run that. Okay, and done. Okay, let's return to where I came from. Even though there's no return, it still returns. It doesn't return any value. And then we return right here, and then, oh, that's the end of the program. So that's how that goes through. This video has been super long, so I'm going to cut it off right here. If you have any questions, feel free to go to the forum, onestopprogramming.com. This source code will also be on the blog at onestopprogramming.com/blog under the Python tutorials if you're having any trouble with this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.